will become evident in this section that the Torlinks panel system can be used to create virtually any design in any outdoor location. We will go through step by step the installation techniques required to transform Torlinks center panels into a backyard putting oasis. Many of the techniques in this installation are similar to the ones described previously. The end result will be a putting green that appears to be built into the landscape but installed in a fraction of the time. Prior to installation, it will be necessary to decide on the shape and size of the green. We find that 1/4-inch graph paper is a terrific way to represent the panels. Each square on the graph paper will represent approximately a 2 foot by 2 foot panel. Laying out the green in this manner will avoid many problems prior to going into the field. It is important to take into consideration the overall width of the turf that is to be used. Most turfs come 12 foot and 15 foot wide, and this need be taken into consideration if and when a seam is going to be incorporated. If you are going to use fringe, then this needs to be taken into consideration now. An example would be a 15 foot wide putting surface with 2 feet worth of fringe on each side. This will require 19 feet of panels. Remember, the panels are not exactly 2 feet square, so don't assume 4 panels is 8 foot in length. Once the green design has been decided, transfer the size and shape of the green to the job site using a tape measure and marking paint. This is only a rough estimation of the finished size and shape. Most job sites require some type of site preparation prior to installation. One of the huge advantages of Torlinks is that traditional site work is not necessary due to the fact that the panels are the base, not the earth under the panels, which is typical of all compacted base or concrete based greens. If there is grass growing in the area that is earmarked for the putting green, it will be necessary to eliminate it. However, we don't want to break through the top surface of the soil if we can avoid it. 2 methods that we have used that work very well are either spraying the grass a week or so earlier with a weed control product such as Roundup, or use a string weed eater and remove the grass all the way down to the soil. Remember, the root structure of the existing grass helps to firm up the base. Once the grass has been removed, or in some cases there will be no grass at all, it is time to add or remove contours according to the customer's preference. This is done easily by depositing materials such as decomposed granite or crushed limestone into these areas. It will be your job to look over the terrain and help the customer decide where they want breaking putts, straight putts, and of course take into consideration drainage. By simply adding some stone dust and raking it into place with a landscape rake, you can make easy work of creating a beautifully contoured green. Remember, don't overdo it, unless you are creating a miniature golf course. Most putting greens are not severely contoured, especially when dealing with a small square foot area. It may become necessary to dig out some areas if the contour in the existing landscape is too severe. These will be the decisions that you'll have to make on site. The goal was to make the site preparation step as easy and fast as possible. The only time you should need to bring in large amounts of fill is if the customer is insisting that the green is installed in a severely contoured part of the yard and it's necessary to build up the area to a somewhat level plane. Once you have raked the fill and created the basic shape, simply spray the area with a garden hose and either hand tamp the fill material or, if available, use a plate compactor. Now that you're satisfied with the site preparation, check to make sure that your basic green shape is correct and the spray painted lines you did earlier are still visible. One of the first steps that we like to do is to place the ICC cup panels into the approximate location in the green and check to see if we like the hole locations. We can always change these locations later when we are building, but this will give you a good indication as to where the holes will be and if the putts are to the customer's liking. One of the most important things to do during a Torlinks installation is to lay down a high quality fiberglass weed control cloth. Don't skimp on the quality. We don't want a plastic bag type material, but a fiberglass cloth, which is available in most all garden centers. We have found over the years that using a 4-foot cloth is best. The inclination would be to go wider, but if you have to go back and adjust the sub base, it's easier to go with a narrower width. Roll out the weed control cloth the entire length of the green, being certain that there are no wrinkles in the cloth. If you see an area that appears to be too lumpy, now is the time to smooth it out with the rake. Use standard landscaping spikes and secure the cloth in place. Start to assemble the Tourlinks panels one at a time along this cloth area. After 3 or 4 panels have been laid down, stand up and walk on the panels, making sure they feel solid underfoot. The panels should not rock or feel unstable. If they do, this means that your substrate has got too much material or maybe not enough. Correct it now. You don't want to have to go back and correct the problem later. You can actually start building the panels on any portion of the green, but we often start in the center row and work outwards. In this particular installation, the customer wanted a very flat, level putting surface in the middle of the green, so particular time has been spent to ensure that this area is flat. Continue assembling the panels using the technique which we have described throughout this manual. Pull the panels towards you. It is at this point that you need to determine the gap size that needs to be left between the panels. We always leave a slight gap between panels to allow for expansion and contraction in the elements. This expansion and contraction is the key to the success of a Tourlinks installation. It's the same method that is used when contractors build a driveway or sidewalk. The individual segments must be able to move without affecting the unit next to it. The rule of thumb is if the panels are hot to the touch, leave approximately a 1/16 of an inch gap between the panels. If the panels are cool to the touch, leave an 1/8 inch gap between the panels. We do this because if the panels are hot, that means they are already expanded, and we just need to leave a little bit extra room. If the panels are cool to the touch, then we must allow for the full expansion that will occur when the panels get hot. Continue to assemble the panels according to the design sheet. Install additional weed control cloth overlapping the previous piece by about 4 inches and spike it into place. When you come to an area that you have a panel located that will be a cup, simply take your paint and spray the center hole in this panel to transfer the location to the weed control cloth. This little extra step just ensures we don't miss a cup. Many installers are opting to use regulation cups and flags in their installations rather than the Tourlinks cups. We have designed a method for converting a Tourlinks filler plate into a receptacle to hold a regulation cup. You still get the advantage of the Tourlinks floating cup design, but the added feature of a regulation length cup. This extra step will require a bit more work and must be taken into consideration prior to building the panels. This is because it will be necessary to excavate the earth under the panel in order for the full-length cup to work. When you come to an area with a full-length cup, place the panel into the proper position, lock it into place, and carefully trace around the interior hole of the panel onto the weed control cloth. Remove the panel and set it aside. Take a razor blade knife and cut around the hole that was transferred to the weed control cloth. We have found that using a post hole digger is a perfect tool to excavate down into the ground. Excavate a neat cylindrical hole about 6 inches wide and about 12 inches deep. Once the hole has been excavated, insert a metal sleeve or a PVC sleeve into the hole that you have excavated. If you can't find a PVC sleeve, a metal ductwork that is available from your home center works very well. Insert the sleeve into the ground until it is flush with the ground surface. Place some of the excavated soil around the outside perimeter of the sleeve, making sure that it is packed into place. Pour about 6 inches of pea gravel into the sleeve for drainage. It may be necessary to put some additional weed control cloth back on top of your work area and then carefully cut around the sleeve. We want to make sure that no weeds grow up around this area. Reinstall the panel back into position, temporarily insert the cup into the panel, and make sure everything is aligned perfectly. Remove the cup for now. Regulation cups are created by simply taking a Tourlinks filler plate and tracing the cup onto the top of the filler plate. Use a jigsaw and carefully cut out this area. Insert your cup into the filler plate and position it to the height you require according to your turf. Drill 3 small holes through the filler plate and into the cup at the very bottom of the filler plate. Insert 3 number 10 by 3/4 inch stainless steel screws through the cup and out of the side of the filler plate and lock it into place with a lock washer and nut. If it is necessary for the cup to be angled slightly to adjust to the terrain, simply tighten one of the screws more than the others to create the proper angle. This is very similar to the way a Christmas tree stand works. Continue to build the panels standing up and walking as you go along, making sure everything feels solid. If you come to an area that you're not happy with the contours, now's the time to change it. As you build the green and you come to the outside perimeter where the lines have been painted, simply build the panels to extend slightly past these lines. Once the entire area has been constructed and you are happy with the cup location and designs, begin to transfer the spray painted lines from the ground onto the panels using a piece of chalk. Chalk works great because you can brush it off easily from the panels. This step will take a little bit of time to get the markings accurate. Once you have transferred the design, step back and make sure you're happy with the look of the green. Using a standard jigsaw and a 4-inch aggressive wood cutting blade, cut the panels directly on the ground, being certain there are no sprinkler pipes or electrical cables underneath that could be cut with the saw. You will notice that as you are going along your cut lines, there will be large pieces of panels that will be drop-offs. You want to evaluate the size of your drop-offs and see where they can be used to avoid cutting full panels in the future. Remark your lines on these cutoffs and continue to cut. By using this drop-off method in all the areas that are suitable, you can greatly diminish the amount of scrap. The more drop-offs you use, the more money you save on the installation. Continue cutting around the entire perimeter. Once you're done, step back, make sure everything looks good, or retrim if necessary. Now that everything has been cut, proceed with screwing the panels around the outside perimeter. Using our self-tapping screws and washers, install 2 rows of screws around the entire perimeter of the green. Double check to make sure that all of your panels have been spaced properly before you proceed with connecting them together. You're only screwing the outer perimeter, essentially securing the outer ring of the green. Don't over-tighten your screws. Back them off a 1/4 turn. We want the panels to be able to move freely during the expansion and contraction that occurs naturally. When going over a severe contour, it is oftentimes necessary to add some additional screws to the teeth in the panels on the contour. We have never seen a situation where the teeth actually migrate through the turf, but by placing a few screws in this area, we can prevent any potential problems. A good way to do this is to have someone stand on the panels while screws are inserted in these small areas. If you're still not happy with the smoothness of the panels at this time, then use a belt sander to quickly glide over the tips of the teeth, removing any high spots. You're essentially creating a perfectly smooth surface. This will only take a few minutes and is well worth the time for a professional installation. When installations are larger than 20 feet, we like to attach the panels directly into the substrate. In this case, we will use metal spikes, but if the installation had been on a wooden deck, we would have recommended galvanized deck screws, or if it had been on a concrete floor, we would have used self-tapping concrete screws. This step is not essential, but we have found it is a very good practice to ensure the size of the green never moves. Even though we are locking the outer perimeter of the green in place, expansion and contraction will continue to happen inside the green because of the gaps that we have left between the panels. This is the secret of Torlinks. It will be necessary to remove a few screws that you have already placed in order to insert the spikes into the ground. Simply back out the screws and drill a 5/16 inch hole on the outermost hole of the panel. Depending upon the soil type in your region, a 12-inch to 24-inch spike will be required. The harder the ground, the shorter the spike. Simply drive the spike through the newly drilled hole in the panel, being certain that the head of the spike is well below the panel deck height. We don't want the spikes to migrate upwards. Do the spike installation on every 4 panels around the perimeter of the green. Since the panels have been cut along the edge, it will be necessary to backfill the panels to create a solid feel underfoot. This is done very easily by packing more of your crushed limestone material under the panels in these open cut areas. Spray a little water on the limestone to create better packing. Walk around the perimeter, testing often to make sure the edges feel solid. Once you have backfilled this area, take a flat shovel and carefully clean the edge around the perimeter into a straight wall. This will be the area that the turf will eventually wrap over. Use a blower or broom to clean off the entire panel structure and prepare for turf installation. We recommend pre-shrinking the turf prior to installation. This step is accomplished by wetting down the turf with a garden hose and allowing it to dry in the sun. Do this several times to try to force the turf to shrink prior to cutting. We believe this pre-shrinking step is a very important part of the Tour-Links installation procedure. Position the pre-shrunk turf onto the completed panel system. If you are not using a fringe turf, then you will have built a panel structure that is slightly smaller than the piece of turf you are using. If you are using fringe, then your putting turf will be smaller than your panel system. How much smaller will depend on how big of a fringe area you have planned for. In this installation, we are planning to use fringe, so the turf is smaller than the panel system. Using a piece of chalk, draw the shape of your green onto the putting turf. Once you complete the sketch, stand back and take a look to see if you're happy with the results. Using a carpet installer's seam cutter is a great way to follow your chalk line and cut the green to shape. Once you have cut the green, stand back and make any adjustments now. Make sure the putting carpet is laid smooth and flat onto the panels with no wrinkles. Cutting the fringe to match the putting turf can be accomplished very easily. Rough cut the fringe into sections that overlay the putting turf slightly, but extend at least 4 inches beyond the edge of the finished panels. There are several different theories on how the fringe should be oriented due to the grain. Once you have all the pieces of the fringe rough cut, arrange the putting turf so that it overlaps each piece of fringe. Each piece of fringe needs to overlap the next one. Use the seam cutting tool to follow the edge of the putting turf and cut the fringe to the exact shape of the putting surface. The putting turf actually becomes a guide. When you come to a location where 2 pieces of fringe are butting together, you will need to make a butt joint. Continue this process around the entire green until the fringe is a perfect fit around the perimeter of the putting surface. Individual pieces are linked together neatly and at least 4 inches are overhanging the panels. There are many techniques used to seam fringe to putting turf. Many professionals prefer commercial seam glue and seaming cloth. We have had very good success with a product that we call tar tape. Tar tape is actually gutter and flashing tape and is available at any home center. It has a sticky tar surface on one side and a thin aluminum backer on the other. When the tar tape is hot, the turf will embed into the tape, creating a very strong joint. With the fringe and the turf placed in the exact position on the green, carefully roll back one piece of fringe onto itself in preparation of seaming. Cut small sections of tar tape about 2 to 3 feet long. Remove the protective film. Try to get the tar tape in the sun prior to installation. If it is cold outside, use a heat gun to soften the tar tape. Place the tar tape halfway under the putting surface. Place the putting turf back onto the tar tape and carefully unroll the fringe, placing it up against the putting surface neatly. Continue this process around the entire green, seaming all of the fringe to the putting turf and all the fringe to fringe and butt joints. This is a very fast, neat way of creating a professional seam. It is very important, however, to make sure that the tape is hot to get the best adhesion. If you prefer using traditional seam tape and seam glue, then by all means do so. This is a great method and has worked for years. It just so happens that many installers are looking for a faster way to create a quality seam, and the tar tape seems to be a good solution. Now that your entire green has been seamed, it's time to cut your cups. Cut the cups with the Torlinks hole cutting guide. As in all Torlinks installations, this is the preferred method. Simply pull the carpet back, place the hole cutting guide into the detent that surrounds the ICC panels. Place the carpet carefully back into the proper position and plunge a thin retractable razor blade knife through the carpet and glide around the inside of the hole guide. This allows you to cut a perfectly round hole in the exact center of the cup location. Pull back the turf once again and install your Torlinks cup and deck washer and proceed to the next location. When done properly, each of your holes will be in the exact center of the designated location of the ICC panel. Once all the cups have been installed, place the turf back into the proper position and use a carpet kicker to begin to slightly stretch the carpet in all directions. Start in the middle and radiate outwards, stretching the carpet slightly towards the edges. We are not trying to distort the carpet, but merely place a bit of tension on the turf. There are several ways to attach the carpet to the panels on the outermost edge. One method is to secure the turf temporarily with double-sided tape. Place a strip of tape on the outside edge, stretching the turf over the edge and sticking it to the tape. This will hold the turf into position for preparation of spiking. Do this all the way around the perimeter until your turf is perfectly smooth and tight to your panels. In some environments, the double-sided tape will not prove to be permanent. The turf should now be overhanging the panels by approximately 4 inches and can be wrapped over the edge of the panels and spiked with landscaping spikes into the ground at the bottom of the panels. When you go around a curve, it will be necessary to cut the turf to relieve the tension so it wraps neatly around the panels. Spike the turf every 12 inches or so around the perimeter using landscaping spikes. If your spikes are not holding particularly well because of the soil, then you can add a few galvanized tacks or small stainless steel screws through the turf and into the outer edge of the panels. Do this every 2 feet or so to ensure that your turf stays tight. Once the turf has been stretched and secured to the panels and spiked to the ground, you can begin to backfill the turf with gravel, sand, dirt, or other landscaping material. By adding a bit of gravel, you add additional weight to help hold the turf into place. Do this all the way around and then proceed with your final landscaping steps by adding mulch, sod, rock, flowers, etc. If you had chosen to use our pre-cut computer turf for a custom in-ground installation, the only difference would have been you would have used the actual pieces of pre-cut turf and the pre-cut fringe to draw the shape of the green onto the ground and the panels. You would not have needed to get creative and sketch the shape onto the panels because the design would have already been created by the computer. Essentially, the computer did the work for you. Remember, one of the things to be certain to do when using pre-cut turf or fringe is always to allow an extra 4 inches for all sides. For example, if the fringe was scheduled to be 16 inches wide on the green, then you would need to have cut the turf to 20 inches to allow for 4 inches of wrap. An easy method for transferring the image to the panels would have been to draw around the putting turf with chalk and then measure an additional 16 inches to create another line for cutting the panels. This will create the exact shape of the putting turf and the fringe onto the panels. When installing an exterior putting green over 20 feet in length or 15 feet in width, the following installation steps should be taken in order to prevent future turf wrinkling. The steps that have been discussed, including pre-shrinking the turf, Seaming the putting turf to the fringe for both computer cut designs or field cut designs must be followed. The difference in this installation is the techniques used for stretching the turf, securing the turf to the panels, and cutting the cups. Prior to placing the turf on the panels, all the cups must be positioned into your panels. Place the cups and the deck washers into the panels, being certain to center the cup in the middle of the opening of the panel. Use a landscaping spike to temporarily fasten the cup to the ground. This will prevent the cup from moving during the turf installation. Do this procedure for all the cups. Make sure all the panels are properly fastened together with the proper gaps and completely clean. Now carefully place your pre-shrunk turf onto the panels. Starting at one end, fasten the turf to the outer edge of the panel using one of the techniques we have described. Use a carpet kicker to begin to stretch the turf onto the panels. The diagram shows the pattern you should be using to achieve an even stretch. As you get to the outer edge, fasten the turf to the panels. One method that works well is to install a screw into the ribs of the cut panels. This is an easy way to attach the turf without leaving any marks on the turf surface. This works particularly well with putting turf. Had the installation been a bump rail panel system, then you would need to screw directly into the panels from the top. Continue this process all the way around the perimeter of the panel, stretching evenly. If done properly, you have effectively stretched the turf like a drum skin over the panels. With the turf properly stretched on the panels as shown in the diagram and fastened securely to the outer edge of the panels, the last step on a 20-foot or larger green is to cut the cups. We do this last since the turf has been aggressively stretched. We want to make sure that all the cups are in perfect position when complete. Locate the cup through the turf and carefully cut an X into the turf with a sharp razor blade knife. Lift back one of the flaps and slowly cut along the outer edge of the cup using it as a guide. Cut the backing of the turf first. This makes a much cleaner cut. Once the entire cut is finished, remove the spike which was used to secure the cup to the ground and proceed to the next cup. Now that the turf has been properly stretched, secured to the panels, and the cups cut, use a drop spreader to deposit the infill. We recommend depositing a pound to 1.5 pounds of infill, depending upon the pile height of the turf to be used, be deposited into the fringe to act as ballast. This additional step will also help to control future wrinkles as well as better ball control. Use a power broom or a push broom to work the infill into the fibers of the turf. Try to work the infill in diagonally across the turf rows. Use only enough infill to weight the turf and lock in the fibers. Again, typically 1 pound to 1.5 pounds per square foot is adequate. The installation is now ready for final cleanup. The turf can always be pressure washed with a water pressure washer. Do not blast the turf too hard. This is a great way to remove dirt or mold that may develop over time. A product such as Simple Green is a good detergent to use. Had we chosen not to use fringe on this green, but only putting turf, the procedure for attaching the turf to the panels would have been exactly the same, except you would have been wrapping and spiking putting turf rather than fringe turf. We have now demonstrated just how easy it is to build a professional quality custom putting green with far less time and energy than needed for outdated rock and gravel installations. In one day, we have successfully transformed an average yard into a golfer's dream green, ready to entertain family and friends for years to come.